Claire Whitmore came home to find her mother's portrait lying face down in the hall. Two movers were carrying a pale velvet sofa up the main staircase, while a man with a clipboard directed them toward the east wing of Whitmore House. Sabrina Cole appeared on the landing, wearing Claire's white silk robe. For 23 years, Sabrina had been Claire's closest friend. The woman who held her hand when her mother died, arranged the flowers at her wedding, and had once called Daniel Reed the one man worthy of her oldest friend. Now she rested a manicured hand on the banister and smiled as though Claire were an early guest. "You're back," Sabrina said. Daniel thought Zurich would last through Friday. Daniel came out behind her, fastening his cuff, looking inconvenienced rather than ashamed. "We need to talk," he said. "You appear to have finished talking without me," Claire answered. Daniel descended the stairs, still handsome at 40, still wearing entitlement like a tailored suit. "Sabrina and I didn't plan this," he said. "It happened because we were both lonely. You live buried in Whitmore business. We wanted something real." "Take off my mother's robe," Claire said to Sabrina, "before you say another word." Sabrina flushed and went back upstairs. Daniel produced a folder from the console table. "I filed for divorce this morning. Sabrina and I will stay here while our apartment is renovated. You can use the lake cottage." "You're asking me to leave Whitmore House," Claire said. "Our marital home," Daniel corrected. "My attorney says I have occupancy rights." Before Claire could answer, the front doors opened. Alexander Vale entered with Claire's family attorney, Margaret Shaw, and the estate's head of security. Alexander had built Vale Capital into one of the country's largest private investment firms and, appointed 7 years earlier by Claire's mother, he served as independent protector of the Whitmore Legacy Trust. He and Claire had known each other since graduate school. "Access codes to the estate were changed without authorization," Alexander said. "Trust Security notified me." Margaret opened her folder. "Mr. Reed, Whitmore House is trust property, not marital property. Claire is lifetime beneficiary and steward. Your right of residence exists through her consent, which is now revoked. Anything brought in today goes back out." Daniel protested that Claire had inherited the house during their marriage. Margaret corrected him. The trust had owned it before the marriage began. Sabrina insisted Daniel still owned half the company. Margaret again corrected her. The trust held 68%, outside investors 20, employees 12. Daniel, as chief operating officer, held no voting stock and unvested options that wouldn't mature for 18 months. Claire lifted her mother's cracked portrait from the floor. "You have 30 minutes to pack what's yours," she told Daniel. "Sabrina has 10. Sabrina spent 7 of her 10 minutes arguing and the rest stuffing jewelry into a handbag, including Claire's grandmother's sapphire brooch, which security recovered before she reached the door. Daniel carried the bags to the car, glancing back at the house until it vanished from view. When the gates closed, Claire's composure finally slipped. Alexander stayed. "Stay until I stop shaking," she told him. "Don't tell me I'm better off." He sat quietly while she told him what she suspected. Daniel had known the schedule of the Helix partnership, information only 4 people held. Alexander revealed he'd suspected the affair for 3 weeks after a company driver's hotel expense appeared in a trust review. They checked the data room logs together. Daniel's account had downloaded thousands of pages from the Helix files overnight, plus research from a separate charitable entity, the Whitmore Immunotherapy Trust. Someone had elevated Sabrina's foundation credentials to administrator status 6 months earlier. The approval had come from Daniel. Claire froze both accounts and called an emergency board meeting. She also learned Daniel had been meeting with Northridge Pharma, a rival that wanted to acquire Helix before Whitmore's deal closed, the same company that had offered Daniel an executive role 2 years prior. Before Alexander left, Claire asked why her mother had chosen him as protector. "She said I was the only person she knew with more money than the trust, and therefore no reason to steal from it," he said. "She also said I was irritatingly careful with you." He admitted he'd once loved her quietly before she met Daniel. At the emergency board meeting, forensic examiners revealed Daniel had copied confidential Helix data and offered it to Northridge in exchange for an executive contract and a $15 million signing bonus, with Sabrina named Director of Corporate Philanthropy in the deal. Sabrina admitted under the board's questioning that she'd understood exactly what she was doing. The board voted unanimously to terminate Daniel for cause, cancel his options, and refer the data transfer to federal authorities. Afterward, Claire addressed anxious employees in the atrium. No one would lose their job over Daniel's actions, and the Helix partnership remained intact. Asked if she was stepping down because of the divorce, she said, "I'm stepping forward because of it." Forensics also found Sabrina had accessed the trust's distribution schedule, apparently hoping to force a payout during the divorce. "Then it's time my best friend learned what the trust actually does," Claire said. The Whitmore Legacy Trust, created by Claire's mother, owned the house, the company shares, and the family's investments, funding treatment grants and shielding research from commercial pressure. Sabrina, who understood Claire's life intimately but not its legal architecture, filed a civil claim asserting Claire had promised her a 5% foundation stake and lifetime housing rights, backed by a forged letter. Investigators traced the forgery to a foundation printer, with security footage showing Daniel accompanying Sabrina to the records room. Claire filed a fraud counterclaim. When Sabrina called to protest, she revealed that Daniel had promised her the trust would be divided and the house would be theirs. "You didn't take my husband because I failed to value him," Claire told her. "You took him because he promised you my life." Later, in the conservatory, Alexander told Claire about his own estrangement from his brother after a similar inheritance dispute, a warning that justice doesn't guarantee peace. That evening, Claire invited him to a quiet dinner. At the door, he kissed her cheek, gentle enough to be friendship, honest enough not to be only that. Daniel and Sabrina gave a televised interview casting themselves as victims of Claire's control. Claire refused to counter emotionally, choosing instead to publish trust documents and board records. Then Northridge sued to block the Helix deal, producing a contract Daniel had signed using titles he never held, funneling $5 million into an escrow account controlled by a company that belonged to Sabrina. The plan, investigators found, was for Northridge to seize the research the moment Helix was announced. Alexander recused himself from Vail Capital's involvement to avoid conflict and testified instead as a witness. In court, the judge denied Northridge's request and referred the fraudulent contract for prosecution, and ordered Sabrina to remove Claire's brooch, which she'd worn to the hearing. Outside the courthouse, Claire laughed with relief, and Alexander told her she was allowed to feel everything without it making her cold. She kissed him. The federal investigation unraveled Daniel and Sabrina's partnership as thoroughly as it had unraveled their alliance. Each blamed the other. Meanwhile, the Whitmore Foundation Gala approached, an event Sabrina had run for 9 years. Claire refused to cancel it, moving it instead to Whitmore House itself, themed Ownership of Hope. While reviewing renovation plans for a proposed residence for visiting researchers, funded jointly but governed independently, Claire and Alexander grew steadily closer, careful never to blur protection with possession. 2 days before the gala, Margaret received evidence that Daniel and Sabrina had planned to leak patient data at the event to crash Whitmore's stock. Rather than cancel, Claire let the plan proceed under law enforcement supervision, replacing the real data with evidence files. At the gala, Sabrina activated a hidden administrator account and sent what she believed were patient files to a cooperating journalist. Instead, the files exposed the entire scheme. Federal agents arrested her on the spot. Daniel, trying to flee, was stopped as well. In the ballroom, the two turned on each other publicly, each naming the other as the architect. Claire addressed the room afterward, refusing to let one person's downfall overshadow the researchers and patients the foundation served. The gala raised twice its goal. Later, in the kitchen, Alexander asked whether she wanted comfort, strategy, or silence. "This," she said, and held him. Daniel and Sabrina were indicted on conspiracy, fraud, and theft charges. Recordings Sabrina had secretly made revealed Daniel's true motives, using her trust in Claire, and love flavored by $15 million. Sabrina received 30 months in prison and was ordered to make restitution. Daniel received 62 months, his unvested options canceled and his hidden funds seized. At sentencing, Daniel accused Claire of destroying him for a company you inherited. She reminded him that inheritance had given her responsibility, his own choices had given him his sentence. The divorce was finalized. Claire reclaimed her name. Construction began on the researcher residence, funded equally by Claire and Alexander, but governed by an independent trust. Their relationship deepened in the ordinary rhythms of life: Sunday cooking, disagreements over library fireplaces, quiet nights after old nightmares. A year after the gala, the first Helix therapy entered expanded trials with promising results. Alexander proposed in the Carriage House Library on an ordinary rainy Tuesday beneath a young magnolia tree planted for the residents, belonging to neither of them. "I don't want your mansion, your company, or your trust," he told her. "I want mornings, arguments about outlets, and the privilege of knowing who you are when no one needs you composed." Claire accepted, with 3 conditions: separate attorneys for the prenuptial agreement, no changes to the trust, and independent governance for the magnolia tree. He laughed and agreed to the first 2. They married that autumn in the winter garden, beneath her mother's restored portrait, its frame still bearing a faint scar from the day it fell. Their vows were shorter than their prenuptial agreement. Alexander promised never to mistake silence for consent, and always to remember her coffee order. Claire promised to speak before resentment turned to distance, and to build a home where neither love nor independence had to lose. Standing later in the quiet hall, Claire understood what Daniel and Sabrina never had. They had seen her trust as money, her company as leverage, her home as a prize for whoever was bold enough to take it, and had forgotten not who owned those things, but why she protected them. Her greatest victory wasn't listed on any asset schedule. She had learned that a friend who envies you is not family, a husband who uses you is not a partner, and a man who truly loves you never needs to own what's yours. When Alexander asked if she felt different, she said, "No, I feel more like myself. That was the love Daniel and Sabrina never understood. Real love doesn't transfer ownership. It returns a person to herself.